You may not have heard of my guest for this episode unless you follow badass female martial artists or the ancient martial art of Lua. But this woman is a fierce warrior through and through. Michelle Manu is the only woman to be given the designation of Knights Commander by the Royal Order of Kamehameha I for the protecting and promoting of Hawaiian culture through the Lua, the indigenous warrior art of Hawaii. Michelle dedicates herself to helping women by teaching self defense and passing on her knowledge. She also happens to be a lawyer, holds credentials from Harvard Business School, is a grandmother of twin boys, and is an expert in Polynesian dance. Right before we sat down to talk, I looked out my window and saw a massive hawk sitting right in my backyard. What a symbol to bless our conversation. And I want to encourage everyone who is listening to head on over to the YouTube version of our conversation, where you can see Michelle show us some Lua Hawk technique in honor of our pre-conversation visitor. But for now, please sit back and enjoy this deep and wonderful conversation I had with Michelle Manu. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bruce Lee podcast. My guest today is Michelle Manu. I can't wait for you all to know a little bit about her. So without further ado, hi, Michelle.
Hi, Shannon.
It's so nice to see you, to have you here, to meet you, because, we're just getting to know each other right now, right?
Right. Yes. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. I mean, we've been talking this season on the podcast about being a warrior, what it means to be a warrior, what a warrior is. We've been talking about AAPI identity, Asian heritage. We've been talking about Bruce Lee, obviously, and the wisdom that we've learned and how we approach our lives. And so, I mean, you to me are just like all these things wrapped up in one. So let's talk. Let's tell everyone who you are and what you're all about. So you are a martial artist, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so tell
100%.
me, yeah, you're a martial artist. So let's start with this. You're a martial artist. You're a lawyer, right? You're
During the day, by
during the
day.
day, by day. That's right. You are a teacher.
Yes.
You are someone who stands up for women's rights.
Yes.
You are so many wonderful things. So, so let's start with martial arts because I always love to have these conversations. So, what drew you to martial arts? How did you get into martial arts?
Oh, okay. So it wasn't really a conscious thing. So my mother saw a 2-for-1 special in the 80s, right? And so it was 84. And she said, that's it. You and your sister are going to go ahead and try that. And so we did. And I was very uncomfortable. They put on the pajamas, which is the gi and the belt. And they spoke all these different, words. It's a different language. And just followed along intuitively. And then I think the first 10 minutes on the floor, I realized, oh, this isn't a boys' activity because it was back in that time. Very few young ladies were practicing. And I realized this isn't for boys. This is for me. And something, it was one of those pivotal moments. I can name maybe like 3 in my life. And that was one of them. And I wasn't aware the roots that actually sunk in at that moment. And I studied. Now I've been studying since I was 9, and
Wow.
I found my late teacher in the late 90s and became, again, another pivotal moment. I became a disciple, and he reprogrammed my body. And I just move Hawaiian Lua style, the Kaiwalu lineage. And he since left us. And so I've begun teaching more and more.
Yeah. But so tell me, how did you find your way into Hawaiian Lua, which is, an indigenous warrior art of Hawaii, right? Like
Yes.
you grew up not in Hawaii, right? So how did you come across this art?
Well, you hear about it, and you hear about how sacred it is and how secretive it is, and that you really can't find a kumu or an alohe to accept you and learn. And so when I returned from the Midwest, I was a Polynesian performer in the Midwest. When I returned in 97, it was pre-internet. So I opened the Yellow Pages, and under martial arts schools, he was listed. And I thought, my gosh, could this be the art? Why would it be here? And sure enough, the story is, and the family would probably get mad at me again, but I call and I ask if I can speak to the Alohe, and the woman answering says he doesn't teach women, and she hangs up.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I called back and I said, I think we got disconnected, and I just would love to speak with him. I've been an athlete my entire life. I've done hula since I was 3. I would love to speak to Alohe and see if I can come and watch a class, or he might teach me. And she said he doesn't teach women, and she hung up.
Oh.
And so, being the little a-hole that I was in my early 20s, I was like, oh no, I'm calling back. And so I called back and I said, I don't know what happened. We keep getting disconnected. I'll just keep calling back. And
Mm.
so at that point, she took my phone number, and he called, and we spoke for 20 minutes. He asked me all about my background and invited me to watch a class. And I went to watch, and it was exactly what I needed. I wanted more contact. I wanted to get back to that. And he was very militant. We were very much soldiers during our training. And there's a difference between soldier and warrior. So now I'm out on my own, and I'm now a warrior, free thinking, using what he taught me, making it my own. He said, I give you the recipe. I give all of you the recipe. All of you will cook it differently. You'll present it differently. You'll season it differently, but it's still the same recipe. And so, yeah, that's how I found Lua, and how I'm moving forward now.
Yeah, so you said something interesting. You said the difference between a soldier and a warrior. So, I mean, I picked up on what you said in terms of a sense of freedom and agency between between the two. But explain more about the difference between those two things.
Well, I can think back to my 20 plus years of training, and it was very militant. So we really didn't breathe unless he told you to. It was thousands of times doing the same thing, hitting the ground hundreds of times every class. And you didn't do anything unless you had his permission. I'm grateful for the training, and I'm grateful for my Lua brothers, in which I was raised with. But you got permission. The first time I was asked to teach women was for PALMA, Pacific Association of Women Martial Artists. And I was finally, after a year and a half of asking, given permission to teach only this much, only this way, to only this amount of women. And it took a while, and he set me up to fail. There was no way I could teach 4 pieces of Meakawa or weaponry in an hour to 30 women, sectioned off, into 4 groups.
Right.
When I got back, he said, what did you learn? Did you have a good time? And I said, no, Alohe, I didn't. And he said, well, what happened? I said, I did what you told me. I did everything, and it didn't work. And he said, well, what did you learn? I said, that I have to do it my way. He goes, very good. So that was the first lesson for me in 2010. Being a warrior started while he was still alive, while he encouraged all of us to go out and do and expose and perpetuate the Hawaiian lua, ultimately the deeper parts of the culture, in which most people don't know. They go to Hawaii, they go shopping, they wear the plastic lei, they make jokes about I got laid in Hawaii. They go to a luau,
Yeah.
which was, a ceremonial feast for real specific purposes in ancient times. And now it's this kitschy thing with very good, younger looking, and gentlemen and women up there wearing very little clothing. But, I get to expose now as a warrior and perpetuate and promote and protect the cultural art, the warrior art, in showing that you make it your own. You take what your teacher gave you, take what I give you, and you make it your own. You make it work. Something that's going to work for me at 5'7", at 160 pounds, and proud of that. Proud of my power.
Yes. Hmm.
Don't have to be a size 0. won't work for someone that's 350 pounds or 90. So we have to use our strengths, and that's part of wisdom of a warrior and becoming whole. So there are very, very much differences. And I know we're scared to deviate from what our teacher taught us, but it's our duty, and our ancestors did that in every culture. They made it better. They say, how
Yeah.
can you teach this cultural art on Zoom? And it's been extremely successful with students all over the world for a full year now. Well, you know
Mhm.
why? Because our ancestors were progressive and innovative, and they would have used Zoom if they had
Yeah.
that available to them. So,
Yeah. Well, so much of what you say resonates with me and obviously with my father and his journey, right?
yeah,
Like walking your own path and having to make something your own and having to figure out what works for you, what's useful, what's useless, what is your own part of that recipe, right?
right,
Yeah, yeah. So that does speak very directly to a warrior. I've been talking a lot on the theme of warriors recently in some of the AAPI talks I've been giving and panels I've been participating in, and a lot of people are asking, what is a warrior? And to me, it is that tapping into an expression of oneself.
correct.
It is the um, creation of skill, right? Like rising to challenge through skill and through carefully cultivating skill, but then really coming from your very own heart and soul and
Mm.
making it your own, right? Is that what?
Even more on that, I think
Mhm,
soldiers are more intellectual. They use the mind more. If we talk truly about balance and the mind, body, and spirit, you
mhm.
have to really think about like the masculine energy, the thinking and the doing, versus the feminine, which is the feeling and the wind up and the potential coiled energy. I think we know even in our personal lives, when a situation occurs or something needs our attention, and it continues to get our attention because it continues to keep coming up, it's not just like, okay, this logically makes sense, and you do your pros and cons list like we're taught by Stephen Covey, right? It's also maneuvering over to the feminine, the quiet, introspective, spirit side, and how do you feel about that? So getting the thinking and the feeling to kind of balance and say, you know what, this makes sense and this feels right. And I think when you've got that, that's truly a definition of a warrior. Whenever you're either on the mat, you're in the ring, or in your personal life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And, don't think, feel, right? Like so no, and I think that's exactly right. And in my book, I talk about like the bridging that gap between thought and action through the feeling, through the sensing. And so thank you for sharing that so beautifully and so eloquently.
Oh, geez, thank you.
So there's so many different places to go. Because Lua, I would imagine a lot of people don't know about Lua, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not very highly publicized art, and as you say, it was secretive for a long time, right? So tell us a little bit about Lua, and then also tell us like what would you want people to know about it?
Oh gosh, what a deep question. Um, Gosh, where do I even start? Well, it's very, very closely held to the chest, and it is a revered cultural practice. So it's not just like martial arts. You go, you pay for your lessons, and you show up. And there's more to finding out who you are through the movements. And there's so much in life where that's the modality in which we find it, but the cultural art. I mean, just in the Hawaiian culture, when the bush is sacred. People make jokes. Oh, the pillow's sacred. The bush is sacred. Everything's sacred here. We'll throw a rock and it's sacred. And people make fun of that, but it truly is. And you know what makes something sacred is the process. So, like, say when we make our mea kawa, it's the process in which you're placing your intention for the life of the weapon, for the life of the owner of the weapon, that, no harm will befall it or its owner. Same with the cultural system. There's a lot of introspection and warriorism, digging deeper into who we are through the practice. And it was made up, it's not just of punching and kicking and technique. Well, that was really important. There's also the lapa'au, the medicine aspect. There's also the weaponry aspect, the hula aspect. And I don't know, most people, and even some hula dancers, don't even know that not just was surfing and hula banned, but so was Lua. While there was a public proclamation that, hula and surfing can again be publicly displayed, there was really no proclamation allowing Lua to return. And it's very hard back in the islands to find a teacher if you don't have Coco or Hawaiian blood to teach you. And still on some islands, some women are not allowed to learn. And this is in today's age. So Lua is a beautifully intricate art that is so revered and beloved, and it will change you. And there will always, when there's change affront, there will be resistance. But our culture in all aspects is much deeper than, the plastic lei and the Mai Tai. And that's what I'm hoping others will learn about Lua. You won't probably see it in a brick and mortar. You'll see it practiced outside in nature and mostly at night.
Yeah. Oh, mostly at night.
Yes.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, one, to conceal it from the missionaries.
Yes, of course.
Yes. So they thought they were just doing hula, right?
Uh-huh.
But it helps our senses to practice in pitch dark. It helps the warrior walk heel toe, toe heel reverse for the large tree roots that you might encounter at night. A trick for us warriors is not to look eye line, but to look directly up, and you can see all movement at eye line. So very interesting to hone those skills. Yeah. So.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so you teach now and you teach online. So if people are interested in wanting to know more about Lua and of course know more about you, where can they find you?
Well, I have I believe it or not, I have an online classroom, and that's done very well. The curriculum is there. It's a mixture of hula leading into the Lua movements, as well as metaphysical science. Pohihihi is the name in Hawaiian, and deeper aspects of ourselves, our nano quantum beliefs that make up our undercurrent of our programming and how we see something. We learn these joint dislocation locks and terrible sweeps and manipulation of fingers and joints. But if we don't have control over who we are and the trauma that we've endured. We all have our stories. If we don't resolve those in a time of an incident, when you know that de-escalation is no longer an option and this is going to get physical, we want to have control of ourselves and not misuse that and use it for its sole purpose of self-defense of ourselves and our loved ones.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I feel like that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned in martial arts was this agency over oneself and over one's sort of preconditioned presets, like digging those out and understanding what they are, right? And then being able to like work with them and on top of them and through them, rather than, letting everything go out the window the moment that you get triggered in some way.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard because your opponent may be pushing the buttons of the ego. And I read an article that you have on your website about your father and how his teacher Ip told him to take the week off, and that is when he came up with his most famous saying, "Be like water, my friend. Be water, my friend." And it's when he got angry and he punched the water and he noticed that the water gave. And I think that's part of it, is knowing who our opponent is and dancing hula, dance with your opponent and get it done quickly. But allowing to have some sort of self-control over, our emotions and to respond, back to the emotions and thoughts, right? Balancing.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So what would you say has been the greatest gift of the martial arts for you?
Oh my gosh, another
Or
one.
doesn't have to be the greatest. It can be one of the greatest or several of the greatest gifts.
And I think when you grow up in an environment where it's not safe, where it's unpredictable, it gives you a real life sense of confidence in what you can do. And in that, and as like today, as you start to learn more self-defense, you continue to train, that confidence starts to lessen the fear, and you know what you're capable of. And so you really lessen the fear and paranoia of being harmed. That is really what it's given me. And then on top of that, being able to impact others and watch this true transformation, not without some resistance.
There's always resistance.
of women and men stepping into their empowerment and their power and owning their space. And no, it gives them the confidence to dig more into who they are and to become more than who they are. They don't have to settle for their past. It doesn't define them. They don't have to settle with, who they're with right now that doesn't appreciate it. And they're being told certain things about themselves, which they know is not true, or society as a whole, those external messages coming in to challenge us. But I can tell you, when they come in to challenge me, it's a good time to get into that introspective portion and say, am I misseeing something? Is there some level of truth here? That willingness of examining yourself instead of saying, this is just how I am,
Yeah.
and then finding, oh my gosh, you know what? No, I'm on track. In fact, I'm going to tighten all this up and I'm going to keep moving forward. And it's almost like this amazing blessing of affirmation. So that's what I find, to be helpful for me.
Oh, so definitely. I mean, everything that you said is so in line with so much of what my father would say, right, as well. So I just love when these lessons, are experienced by so many different people, whether they came, through an experience with him or whether they just came through your own experience. There are these universal ideas of
Truths.
truths of how we limit ourselves, of how we need to discover ourselves. We talked about self-knowledge, and
Yes.
that all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge, and so we just have to keep seeking and seeking. Yeah, yeah. So I love it.
On that note, which can get me in some trouble, none of us owns any of this information. So
Totally.
it is freely flowing if we stay
Totally.
in that state of neutrality, willingness, and acceptance. And so to highly guard something, yes, of course, give credit. But, there's also about sharing with others so that
Mhm.
these amazing principles and truths can impact others. And really, isn't that what it's about? We do have the martial arts teachers that, love to stand up there and just hear themselves talk. But really, when we dig down to it, we need to support each other, collaborate, and share with what we're doing in our little corner of the world in which we're trusted. And
Yeah.
that means that we can't hoard. We have to share. Otherwise, we don't, I guess, evolve collectively. And that's really what it's about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so I'm curious, because you had said to me, before we started, and you've intimated it a bit as well during this conversation, but that the art of Lua was secret, and that it's mostly male dominated. And so I'm curious, like, what is your experience as a woman teaching this art and also sharing it widely with so many people?
Wow, you're an amazing host. These are, yeah, very deep questions. Um, So with the blessing of my teacher, came onto the scene publicly, met with quite a bit of resistance. Look at her. Who does she think she is? Which, I think everyone, male or female, can come up against that when you do start to share principles and concepts. Your father absolutely came across that heavily.
Totally.
But to teach as a woman is pretty remarkable for me. I bring a different recipe, if you will. We talked about that, same recipe, season and present it differently. And this I do because of my hula experience. You may find someone that teaches Lua, but they may not incorporate the Lua into it. And it's very important for the movements. And I say, if you look at the ancient hula, the kahiko, which really the warrior hula is ha'a. I'll get struck by lightning if I don't say that right now, like the elders. But if you think the very serious hula, the ritualistic and the ceremonial hula, if you look at those beautiful moves and you turn that into contact, that is what Lua looks like.
Mhm.
So very beautiful. And I can show you a little bit later out in the little dojo space if you want to see maybe one thing like the hawk converted.
Mm.
But
Mm.
yeah, I'm just I don't know. I think it's progress. I think that now there's a lot of support from so many different arts. It's overwhelming, and likewise, I support them and what they do because there isn't one right way, and there isn't one right art. And then you get into the traditional martial arts, into the sports, and then you got those conflicting, and so I think we just need to be true and not dilute what we know. You can have 20 black belts in 20 different arts, and that's fine if that's what you choose to do. But I think to uphold the truth in what one has learned is to honor where it came from, and to gracefully and give credit and adjust it a little for today's time.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, my father met with resistance as well in his life. He wanted to teach Chinese kung fu to anyone who had a sincere interest and desire. He wanted to share that. And you spoke earlier about the importance of sharing,
Mhm.
who we are. And I think it also helps us get out of this like scarcity mentality. Like when we
Oh,
hoard, we feel like, oh, there's not enough. I have to hold on to mine. And it's like, there's enough. There's enough for everyone. There's enough, like if we just be open and willing to share and willing to evolve and willing to come to our solutions around whatever we need to, be talking about. So,
right. Replace the poverty thinking and programming with
yeah.
abundance, because there's enough in the multiverse for
Yeah.
everyone. And then speaking on backlash, I sit here only because my teacher, Olohe Solomon Kai'ivalu, came to the mainland and taught non-Hawaiians and
Mm,
got a lot of heat for that, including death threats. So,
mm,
in that sense, he was the pioneer for that. And so I'm able to ride powerfully on his coattails because of what he did. And plus teaching me,
mm,
a halfer on the mainland and a woman. I mean, how
mhm.
grateful am I? If he didn't take a chance on me and upheld all of these rules culturally, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now.
Yeah. 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 And as you say, so you're Hapa, yes?
Yeah.
Hapas unite right here. So speak to me a little bit about your heritage, and I know that, you've had your own struggles that you've had to face growing up as, a person of color in this country, as a racially diverse person. And you have this Hawaiian background, but then you also your mother, right, is
Yes.
Caucasian. And so just talk to me a little bit about, your journey and your heritage, and what have you had to sort of come to terms with, and what are you proud of? What do you love?
So my father is Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese, English, what they would commonly call chop suey. Yeah, my mother was a very dramatic Scandinavian model and actress, then turned teacher after the kids started coming.
Mm,
So, they met in Chicago. We moved to Hawaii Island when I was an infant, and then we relocated to Southern California in the hopes that there would be less racial tension and with an interracial marriage.
mhm.
But that there may have been less, but there was definitely a lot.
Yeah.
So much so that it's very personal. I've never really shared this publicly.
Mm,
That it drove my father mad, literally. I could
mm,
see the increase as a young child into my teens, where he was ready to brawl physically every day. But there was always some sort of verbal and antagonizer, multiple, whether he's walking out of a store or driving, road rage. It was very prevalent back then. And, I was telling you earlier that we always think of this racism and discrimination, this inequality being an external force into the nuclear family.
mm.
But preparing earlier this month for a panel discussion on APPI or okay, you know what I mean,
Yes.
AAPI. Uh, I realized, having an introspective moment,
Mhm,
quiet, that it was actually within my nuclear family. And
mm,
so while I tried to run for class president or make the captain of the cheer squad or any sort of leadership position, my own mother would say to me, "Oh, sweetheart, that's really nice. Are you sure you should run?" And I said, "Well, yes, I'm going to try out. I'm going to run." And she would say, "Okay, but you're not going to win, or you're not going to make captain because you're not white." And so I never really realized that until earlier this month. And so even though now I'm a grandmother of twin boys, I think if we stay open and willing, these messages keep coming to us, and things maybe we've suppressed or maybe wrote off that's just how it was. They come right when they're supposed to, at divine timing, to
Mhm.
show us what we have been through, what we've overcome, and maybe some things we need to focus on now, on our path. And
Yeah.
so it's been, cats have been poisoned, dogs poisoned, police called all the time for no reason, nails at the bottom of the driveway. So, it's
Oh my
just all of,
goodness.
yeah. And being called names externally, now I think it's funny that's all the rage to be exotic. These young ladies have no idea, especially the Instagram models that are exotic, what it's like to actually not be cool to be what we are. So,
Mm,
very, very fascinating turn of events.
yeah.
Mm,
Well, and unfortunately, we are also in a time where there's increased violence,
yes.
right? Against the AAPI community. Um, for these feelings, I think, that have always been there, but they've just been unleashed in this moment through
Yes.
poor modeling.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
And
3,800 hate crimes against Asian and Pacific Islanders just in March. So,
yeah,
um, I don't know if it's always been there. We just didn't get, it wasn't reported on, or if it's actually truly increased, but it shouldn't even be here.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it certainly sounds like you've been through a lot. Everyone has their struggles, but you have tapped into and found this inner strength, and you are sharing it so beautifully out there in the world. So just want to acknowledge you for a moment for being the strong warrior woman that you are, and being willing to look, right? Because as you say, these things come up. I'm shocked all the time. Like, I've learned finally at this ripe old age that I'm at, that whenever I think like, oh, I've I'm over that. I'm totally past that. Like, that no, there's always a deeper layer. And then all of a sudden, like, oh geez, look, that's still there. But it gets better, right? Like, it
oh
gets
my God.
better and better over time.
There's no other way. I think as we continue to peel these layers that are we're made aware of. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no other way to live, really. I don't want to be there. I don't want to be stuck there. And then, sometimes the eagles say, "Oh, you're approaching the top of the mountain, but you're actually a little bit lower. You just need to accept that that's okay." And I welcome the messages that come, right? Like the hawk that showed up right before we started,
Yeah.
nature and people. A stranger can say something to you that you were mulling on over during your morning quiet time or during your morning exercise. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know him or her. Thank you. Thank you for the message. Okay, I know. It's like deja vu, right? It's like
Yeah.
I've been here before. And so that reaffirming message we get throughout our days.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important for us to share our voices, as you said, and I believe 100% as well. All of these things are out there. They've been out there. People have been saying all the same things and trying to promote all of the same messages since there have been people. But this is why, and so really there's nothing that's new. It's just that it's new to you. And so that's why it's so important for people to share their experience and share who they are, because you never know when you're going to be the voice that someone hears and understands in that moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what would you say is most misunderstood or most stereotyped or most taken for granted, whatever you feel is happening about um, the AAPI community right now?
It's just the stereotypes. I think it just perpetuates this lack of comprehension as far as the AAPI to the American, and yet they're American. Like it just doesn't. I did actually read this amazing article. It was just released 3 days ago by the New York Times, and I made some notes here. It was written by Sarah Barr, and these findings were really enlightening to me. I think media has a lot to do with the way that the AAPI communities are really portrayed and treated and disregarded or abused, all of the responses. And I'm just going to read this quickly. Of the 1,300 top grossing films released in 2007 through 2019, just 3.7%, which is 44 films, featured an Asian or Pacific Islander character in a leading role. And 1/3 of the roles went to one single actor. We can guess who that is. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Other sobering statistics: of the 51,159 speaking characters, just 5.9% were Asian American, or Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander. So in the 39% of these films, not a single Asian or Pacific Islander speaking character was included. So I think, and also how they're portrayed when they are in the movie. They experience some sort of disparaging situation experience, always being the victim. And then also, most it's more common than not that they die during the movie. So I think, more positive messaging of who we really are today and the contributions that we have made and continue to make to America. And I think if we could all get aligned on that, whether it's news outlets or media as a whole, film, the industry, messaging within commercials, teaching our children, our children's children to know who they are and to not take that into stock and to keep powerfully living and knowing who they are and loving their culture and still becoming educated and educating others. I think that's the way to go. And I think media would be like your father did with, your art, how he used media to really get his message out, not just the art, but also the philosophy of his life and your family's life and the art also, how he approached that. He was able to reach the world and continues to reach the world for what he did. And I think media would be the way for us to move if we could get all of these things corrected slightly, or at least change course a little bit and adjust towards that way. I think the world will learn a little bit more about us, won't have that much fear of the unknown. Like, what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar says, make a friend that doesn't look like you.
Right.
He's got the t-shirt of your father and him. And this is the truth. I mean, the segregated areas of this country should learn more than what has been out there about the AAPI communities. And that would be a really great start.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. And thank you for reading those statistics from that article. I'm always shocked and appalled. I know there was another article recently where they asked a bunch of people to name one significant Asian American person. And like, I can't remember I don't have it in front of me, but it was like 40 something percent. The number one answer was, I don't know. And then it was followed by like Jackie Chan. And then it was followed by like Bruce Lee, who are not even current. I mean, Jackie Chan is, but current people in the world doing great work today, So anyway, I'm always shocked by those sorts of things, but this is why we use our voice. This is why we are out here teaching, sharing who we are. So I have a question for you. Do you have a Hawaiian name?
I have two. One is really quite funny
Okay.
and not sexy at all. So one was Ihilani, and the other one that's not funny, is not sexy, is Miki Ala. It's a spin-off of Michelle, but it means alert and on time.
Oh, and are you alert and on time?
Yeah.
Aptly named.
It gets a little overwhelming back to back. So I'm always like, frantic. I don't give myself enough time. So I drive really fast, So yeah, I try to live up to them.
And what does your first name mean? The first one you shared?
Of the heavens. So
Of the heaven.
highly exalted of the heavens. So
Oh, beautiful,
thank
beautiful.
you.
I love just hearing the meaning behind these
Mm,
names. I think Asian names and Hawaiian names. I have
yes.
dear family that live in Hawaii, and we go and see them
Uh,
every year, and they have these beautiful names. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? And so thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
mhm.
So what do you love? What is one thing you love about your heritage?
Well, I need to get to know more about the Filipino side and the
Mhm.
Chinese side. But with parents gone over 25 years now, it's hard to connect. And life is so busy, but it's important. Um, I love, I'm going to use an agricultural term, hybrid vigor. It means the children are stronger than its parents and
Mm.
of their parents. And I love the mixture of my genes, and I didn't growing up, and now I do. And even with COVID and everything, I feel superior in a way having this mixture. And there are studies that when there are mixtures that it can be superior in immunity. So in the biological sense, I'm grateful for my mixture.
Yeah.
I
And
love the variety. I love that there's so many cultures that have made who I am, and to try to honor all of them as best I can as I continue to learn more. Remember, I'm not as high up on the path as I thought I was. So, you know, learning that. But I have to tell you too, there is some issues with racism in the Scandinavian side too. They don't anyone that's mixed is not considered pure, and so it's been difficult even to find a tattooist that will tattoo the runes unless you're completely 100%. I mean, you can go to
wow.
the tattoo shop around the corner, but it's to find someone cultural, it's would mean a lot. So I need to
Mhm.
get to Scandinavia, mostly, primarily Denmark and very much Norway. And I
Mhm.
have a little splash of Scot in there, the crazy Scot. So, so I have this really funny joke that all of my ancestors are seafaring, weapon wielding drunkards.
You come from a warrior lineage.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, and lineage aside, just share with me something you love about being who you are.
This has been a process with a lot of mixed signals growing up externally, internally. Then, birthing my daughter. And oh, I have to tell you that she shares your father's birthday.
Oh,
So it's
really?
always been a thing in the household. And my one brother would call her Bruce Leah because her name is Malia. So, because
Oh.
she had a mean right straight punch. So, anyway, I get distracted. Um, Gender and ethnicity have been a huge issue, being born in the 70s. And I have since been able to really embrace, and I love being a woman. I cannot, I don't even know how to express it in linguistics about how I love being a woman. Um, Everything we are, all that we govern, everything we oversee, our spiritual sight, our physical sight, being able to juggle all of these balls, being able to navigate through some very difficult misogynistic situations and manipulation. And, once we embrace who we are and the power we have, we can identify it quicker, and we get to not fall into those traps, and we need to stop suppressing our inner woman and say, no, he really doesn't mean that, she really doesn't mean that, when we can say, oh, thank you, warning system, no, or that sounds fine, but if these boundaries are put in place, in Hawaii they say keep your pig fences up, well, that's exactly what those would be, right? So um I just love being a woman. I love being here and showing the decades of consistent training through the power and accuracy of my movements. And I
Mm.
know I probably only have about, I hope, 15 more years to be able to show that, and I'm bringing it. So
Mm.
that's what I really love about who I am right now. And she'll change, right?
Of
The woman
course.
I was last week, I'm different this week. And that is about my resolution to self-evolve and to really look at the ugly side and eat the humble pie of some things I thought I was right about, which, can always be delved into, peel the layer and learn more about who I am.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that is I love to just know, like, I love to see someone really stepping into and claiming themselves, and that's what I see you doing, and it's beautiful. Um so this is the Bruce Lee podcast. We haven't really talked about Bruce Lee, and I'm just curious, as a martial artist, as a person with some Asian descent, like, where did Bruce Lee enter into your consciousness?
Okay, so I wasn't allowed to watch TV growing up, so I still don't have a TV.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, my father had one and he would turn it on and I'd kind of eavesdrop. And there was a portion where I could lay on the stairs and watch, and he wouldn't know. He probably knew. I was watching this little TV that he would carry around with him into the garage and all of that. And yeah, I saw your father move for the first time. That was the first thing I ever saw on TV.
Wow.
And I thought, what was that? Who is he? I want to know more about that. And so I just kind of snuck around trying to watch what he was watching. He also watched several other martial arts shows, and I didn't know what they were at the time. And so as I got older and I was able to go to friends' homes, they obviously had large TVs, and then they would turn on different things, and I would ask for them to put certain things on. But we don't have access like we do today to certain things. But
Right.
I knew at a very young age who your father was and what he was doing. I didn't know about the struggles, though. I didn't know. And even if I knew, I don't think I would have been able to comprehend.
Mhm.
But yeah, very influential man, spirit, martial artist, filmmaker, and a human advocate, an activist for equality.
Mm.
What you do in keeping him relevant and alive, his legacy is his philosophies were needed back then. People weren't ready to absorb it. He was ahead of his time, but and still to this day, but it's still very much needed, as you can see in our world. So he
Yeah.
becomes more and more important to me as time passes, as I run across a real saying that he has said. Not a quote that's been added to another picture, right, of him. But like you said earlier, the level of awareness,
Mm.
as we're in that willingness and that awareness comes, and we're able to absorb it because it's the divine time in which we can absorb that and then apply it. And so he continues to be. I watch your work very closely, and through your work, he becomes more and more prominent to me and what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. No, no. It is my absolute pleasure. I've said this a million times, that the reason I do this is because it's been meaningful and valuable and healing to me in my own life.
Yes.
And so I want to pass that on. I want to share that with others. And so that is what I attempt to do.
Well, we love you and we're very grateful.
Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you. So this is one question that I like to ask everyone who comes on the podcast, because to me, this is, whether I'm talking to a guest or whether I'm just talking the philosophy, it is about sharing wisdom.
Yes.
So one thing I like to ask every guest is, if you had one lesson or one piece of wisdom that you have learned, that you have been able to integrate into your life, that you could pass on to someone else, and they would be able to hear it, and from you, and take it in, what piece of wisdom or lesson would you like to share?
I think it's a power of choice. I think
Mm.
acknowledging that every word has energy to it.
Mm.
And when we realize that, we stop, hopefully, the predator in the mind from continuing to berate us, degrade us, and try to steer us away from what is in our best interest. Understanding that we have the power to create our existence and how we view something, because everything is intangible before it becomes tangible. There are things that work. You know, you look at the skyscraper, that was intangible in someone's mind before he or she drew it out and actually built it. So I think if we understand we're way more powerful and we're not rag dolls to external circumstances like we've been told as we've been raised, then we realize we step into our power and stop the poor dialogue. We start to consider the body like a loved one that can't speak, like an elderly or a child or an animal that we love. What would we feed it? If it doesn't feel well or if it's in pain, wouldn't we allow it to rest instead of fighting through the pain? These are all birthed out of our thoughts, which are energy. They become things. And it's really a cliche, but it's, you know, it's become a cliche. I'm sure there's a shirt out there with it on it. But it's real. It's very real. And I think that's what I would say, is that every thought, not just word and deed, but every thought has power. I think that's life changing.
I think it is too, and thank you for sharing that. That is one thing that I keep sort of trying to put out there as well, which is that my father trained his body. Obviously, you can see his body was this physical specimen, but more importantly, he trained his mind,
Yes.
his attitude, his perspective, you know, and that once you understand that, oh, this is something I can actually train, this is something I can actually work with and change and have influence over, and I can change the way I view the world in a way that makes me able to step into it more powerfully. Like, this is such a huge realization to have. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for putting it out there. It's also more peaceful. We can't fight everyone and everything that comes our way. I think, you know, for our own sanity, you know, is it
Yeah.
worth it? No, it's not. You know, is there anything
Yeah.
I need to learn here? Great. So what mantra do I need to have today? Because, you know, every day is different, but our thoughts are so important.
And this goes to another thing I always say, which is true power comes from peace. It comes from peacefulness. That
Yes.
stillness at the eye of the storm, you know, it's like, you know, my true power emanates from there, because in my peacefulness, I have the clarity to choose. I
Mhm.
have the clarity to respond.
Yes.
Right.
And you're more connected to who you are and the
Hmm.
situation. You start to
Hmm.
feel more.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel right.
So I know you're a warrior in real life, like in reality, like you are a warrior woman, martial artist, and all those things. But what is your style in terms of rising to a challenge that you just face in life? And is it similar to how you engage in martial arts, or is it somehow different?
Well, I definitely drive how I fight. Straight lines, right? Zoom, zoom. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. You know, I always say like life is like a Lua technique. It is Lua. Life is Lua. You know, which is really the deep dark pit where you bury your waste behind the house. That's the figurative meaning of it, and duality. You know, light and dark, good and bad, masculine, feminine. Um, for me, I think I'm not sure. I would say you don't want to stand there and get pummeled. You don't want to stand there and maybe parry. You don't want to stand there, parry, and maybe counter. I mean, what do you really want to do? And life throws these things at you. And since it is Lua, you know, pick the technique for what you're going to do. And, you know, sometimes it's proper just to stand there and maybe maneuver out of its way. Sometimes it's proper to maneuver and parry it, help it to redirect when a situation comes to you. Again, counter and then take down. So I think our situations, my situation, when there is an issue, and as a warrior, I have to be wise. And sometimes silence is the most powerful response.
Yeah.
And there's not always an action that we have to move into. Sometimes I know they say non-action is an action, but sometimes it's non-action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the more and more we can bring wisdom to every moment, the more I think that's what a warrior does. I think a warrior integrates wisdom into their action. So it's not just response, it's not just action, action, action. It
Yeah.
is the integration of wisdom with that action or
I agree.
non-action.
I agree. It's that toxic action, if you will, where you think you got to, the whole thing. Sometimes you don't need to fight with it. Just
Yeah.
let it pass. It's inconsequential. You have other things that need your attention, and your energy too. By the end of the day, we're exhausted just by dodging all of this, let alone responding. So, we need our energy too for our purpose, for us to feel fulfilled and knowing what our purpose is. We need all of that energy. And how dare we give it to others that don't deserve it?
Yeah. Oof. Love that. Um, so on that note, I mean, you have given everyone so much. Thank you for sharing yourself so openly and warmly and beautifully. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and for sharing who you are. I celebrate you and thank you for being a guest on the Bruce Lee podcast.
Unforgettable, Shannon. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you. But you had mentioned maybe showing me something,
Yes.
a demonstration of some sort. So I don't know how easy that is to do.
Okay. Let me get you
Okay,
over into the dojo.
I'm ready to go.
Okay, so like say the ancient hula, the kahiko. So we would do more of the kaholo and the diving hawk or the ascending hawk, rib shots. Like I'll show. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this two moving. So that would be the hawk, and then there's the up and the down. And then for the awana, the more contemporary, it would be more of the flowing wave up your body, which we see more commonly today. So this more of hip movement. So this move is excellent. When we translate that now into contacts for Lua, I'll take you to Bob first. So let's do that. Okay. So if I'm going to do, this is now 2. We just saw this, the diving. So my elbow is at 2. This will be at 8. This will be coming down to 8. We can come up to 11. Shoot for the clavicle. Okay, and then we've got the rising to the ribs. So the 8 and the 4. And then we can do this on the flex bag. So doing this way, then coming upward. So the body becomes the tide, where we come down and we're generating and everything is coming up. And then on the a heavy bag, it's definitely more fun on a person, but I get to see the caving, right? So then you have the rib shots. So coming down and up. So that would be one way that the hawk is used in Lua.
Oh, beautiful. And look at the power of those strikes. I love it. So
You.
crisp and so powerful with so much speed. Thank you for sharing that with me and with everyone, by the way. Of course, when we do the podcast audio version, we won't be able to have that in there because people won't be able to know what's happening. But we also do release it on YouTube. So we'll definitely add that in there, which will be wonderful. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and I hope it's the beginning of getting to know you more.
Me too. Thank you so much. Can I take a screenshot?
Yeah, sure, of course.
This is a new phone, so I'm going to try to not block myself. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a
Bless you
wonderful
and your family.
weekend.